Welcome to the Camp Owners Podcast. On today's show, Kelly and I are excited to chat with Kim Aycock and Jolly Corley, who are going to bring their wisdom and experience and knowledge to the topic of staffing trends for 2021. Whether you're well in your process for hiring this summer, retooling how you recruit staff, there is something for you. So stay tuned and welcome to the Camp Owners Podcast.
Welcome to the Camp Owners Podcast, a space for camp owners to talk about the unique aspects of camp ownership and get inspired by each other. We are going to sit down with camp industry experts, leaders, and fellow camp owners to hear how the camp dream transpired for them, learn from each other, and discuss some of the biggest issues in the private camp industry. Hi, I'm Kelly Shuna. I am the co-owner and director of Hidden Pines Ranch Day Camp in Stillwater, Minnesota.
Hi everyone, I am Howie Grossinger and I am the co-owner of Camp Robindel, a day camp in Toronto, Canada. If you're looking to find and subscribe to the Camp Owners Podcast, you can either find us online at gocamp.pro/ownerspod or by searching for us in your favorite podcast app. Finally, if you're listening to this and think it would be useful to other camp owners or aspiring camp owners in your circle, please feel free to send them a note to listen. Hi, Kelly.
Hi, Howie. We were just talking about our weather and commiserating over the cold. I'm so excited today for this episode, Howie. We are talking with Jolly Corley with Jolly Corley LLC and Camp Robindel, and Kim Aycock with Kim Aycock, Kimspiration LLC, and Camp Consulting and Staff Training. Jolly and Kim, if you think about staffing, I think about them, and I hope that many of you listening do as well. But if you're new to them, they've really spent, the past couple of years talking about staffing, but especially the past 10 months diving into what staffing will look like for the summer, taking the time to listen to potential camp staff, hear their concerns about returning to camp, along with why camp is exactly what they need this summer. We're curious to hear from their perspective, the trends they're seeing in staffing for camps across the country, strategies for recruiting new staff, commitments from returning staff, whether you ran or not in 2020, and the buy-in from all staff for a summer of unknowns.
Well, I'm really excited, Kelly. I have known of Kim and Jolly for many years, attending ACA events and seeing them in action. It's really nice to have a front row seat and them to engage in our conversation today. Kim and Jolly, at the beginning of every one of our podcasts, we do ask each of our guests to give us the almost the Marvel Universe origin story of their camp experience and things of that kind. So if I could just lean on each of you to give us and the audience and sort of an overview of your journey in camp, that would be wonderful. Kim, if you would be so kind to start, that would be wonderful.
Sure. So my story starts between my sophomore and junior years in college, because I never went to camp as a child. And I was in a teacher education program at a small school in Nebraska. And I had a guidance counselor call us into his office. And I was probably one of the few people who took him up on this offer to, talk about our summer plans. What are we doing? And he says to me point blank, he stares me in the eye and he says, "What are you doing this summer that's going to help you be a better teacher?" And I was like, I'm working at the same fast food restaurant I worked at last summer. How's that sound? And he's like, "No, I don't really think so." And I said, "Well, what do you recommend?" And he said, you need to go work at a summer camp, because that's how you truly will know if you are cut out to work with kids. And so me being sort of a naive, 19, 20-year-old, I thought working at camp, I thought I thought I needed to apply to camps where they had tutoring programs. So I was looking for camps that had math tutoring or English tutoring or some sort of tutoring. And so I wound up applying to a whole bunch of camps in Wisconsin by typewriter, typed my letter out, and then fast forward, ended up working at a camp in northern Wisconsin for one summer. And to be honest, I was miserable until the last week of camp. And then I realized this is what it's all about. I truly get it. And then was there for 12 summers, kind of worked my way up to assistant director, was a small enough camp that I wasn't going to be, I could see that I needed to leave to grow myself. And so then I ended up working at a large camp in the mountains of North Carolina, where I was the associate director for 8 years, married a camp guy. And then we he went to dental school, so like really in Mississippi. So I ended up, then that's when I started my consulting business. So I love working and developing young people, campers and staff with those skills that robots can't do. So and now I'm here with you. So thank you.
That's wonderful. This is one of my favorite parts of the show every time we do it, Kelly, because everyone's journey in the business and the amazing things that happen to them and not know what it could lead to just is so inspiring. And Kim, I really appreciate you sharing. And for you, Jolly, tell us a little bit about your camp journey.
Yes, so I was lucky enough to go to camp when I was growing up. Not the kind of camp I work at currently, but I went to church camp, I went to 4-H camp, and then all the kind of little camp, sports camps, things like that. So I liked camp, and I was a camp counselor at the 4-H camp I went to when I was a kid. I got to do that. And to be really honest, I love the movie The Parent Trap. And so I always wanted to go to a camp like that out east. I'm from the Midwest originally. And I was I have a theater degree, so I was going to school, acting. I really liked leadership. I had since my junior leader in 4-H days. And so I had been an RA. I was doing all sorts of cool things on my campus. And I came home, my mom works at Purdue University, and she said, there's a whole bunch of summer camps, and they look like the ones, that are in the Parent Trap, that are looking for counselors. And I'm like, count me in. So I go to the union at Purdue, and I meet a guy named Nat Greenfield, who runs an all-girls camp in New Hampshire. They have navy and white uniforms, just like the movie, all girls. They're there for one session. And I'm like, this is awesome. And I thought I'd be like a lifeguard or something. And then they had a theater, and I'm like, oh, well, I'm a theater major. This is awesome. So I go out there to fulfill my Parent Trap dreams. And much like Kim, it was fun, but I wasn't like, wow, like, oh my gosh, I have to do this for forever. But what got me was our owner director loves to have feedback. Sincerely, it's one of the best things that I've learned from him. And so he asks his staff every year, what should we change about camp? How can we be better? So me being 19 years old, having just finished my first year in the theater program, so I probably took intro to acting at that point, or even maybe not even acting, intro to theater. I wrote a probably 3-page handwritten letter of all the ways his theater could be better. And instead of thinking this is a very confident young woman and just writing me off, he called me that January and said, hey, we'd love for you to come back and run our theater department. We really appreciate the feedback. We think it's great. And as I mentioned, I really love leadership opportunities, and I was a theater major, so it seemed to merge these things. So I went back, ran the department. I figured out all the things of why it was hard to do what you want to do in a camp. You learn the behind the scene programming piece, and it's not a theater camp. So, that's not their most important priority. And so I had to go back for a third year because I figured that part out. Right. So then I had to go back to fix all that. And that was it. I was hooked. And a few years later, when I said, okay, I can't, keep just being a summer camp counselor for the rest of my life. And my husband, by that time I was married, and my husband was getting his first full-time job. They offered me a full-time job by saying, there's this thing now where staff are going to apply on the line, and, you could live wherever. And so I thought, oh, I'll do this until I figure out what I'm going to do. That was 2001. So apparently either this is what I do, or I'm still trying to figure out what I do.
I love it. I like hearing in both of your stories. I don't know if it's because that's why it's our topic today, but hearing how you came to camp. Like, Kim, one person said that to you, and I wrote that down. Like, what are you going to do this summer to make you a better teacher? But also, what are you going to do this summer to make you a better leader, colleague, team player, problem solver? Like, I love one person said something to you, and look at where you are now. And Jolly, for you too, your mom just mentioned that. And then you maybe want to came back if there wasn't that feedback. So all of those little things that staff or that employers and camp directors and whoever it is can do, probably was a small thing at the time, but look at what transpired from that. So I love hearing that. I agree with you, Howie. They're one of my favorite parts. So today, talking about staffing, We need like a state of the state from you ladies. Howie and I want to start off, in the season of town halls as we're wrapping up. We want a state of the state of what you see as staffing for summer camps for 2021.
Kim, do you want to start off?
I sure can. And then I think when I was thinking about the answer to this question, I can give you some vignettes, I guess, talked to somebody a couple days ago at the national conference who says, I'm starting at ground zero. I have no staff and feeling extremely, nervous about that. And then on the other end of the spectrum, hearing from some camps that, said to me, you know what, I'm almost full. I have almost all my staff ready for this summer. And then everything in between. So I think one of the key things, though, that we are hearing and feeling is just the anxiety and the panicky and the feeling stuck and, because we are in such a time of uncertainty, how do we sell that? How do we sell that to our staff, whether it's return staff or new staff? So we have some thoughts on that we'll share with you in just a little bit, but those are probably some of the biggies, I would say.
Yeah, I think we as a camping industry, we know why camp is good for people. Like we just have this innate, like we've experienced it, and it's such an experiential medium, right? Like that's what does it for you. And so how to put that into words, how to connect that for staff has always been a challenge for us. Like we sit there and we say, we have the 21st century living skills. We know we do this, but putting that in a way that people can understand it besides the Parent Trap and Meatball, right? Like that's their experience. If they've never been to camp, that's what they have in their head. And so how we translate that. And I think it's even harder when you can't see it, right? You're not sure how this summer is going to look because of all the uncertainty. And I think one of the things I found is those camps who opened in whatever format they opened, whether it was full or just a little bit, are a lot of times the ones who are having an easier time because they know what it's going to look like. Their staff can return. They kind of have this like platform. For those of us who didn't open, it's harder for us to explain it. And it's harder for staff to see it. Like, what is it going to look like? We've all been part of this uncertainty. So I think the state of the state is exactly what Kim said. It's all over the place. And it's the tricky part of what it's going to look like.
Yeah, I'm so glad we started with this because I know I can speak for myself. This has been part of the starting point of this journey to staffing my own camps and I know many camps have done staff town halls and trying to be transparent and trying to, finding the right balance of optimism and realism about painting pictures of what, we may be eating more of our meals outside. We may be shutting down some of the activity areas so we can focus on these things. So, is it your sense that, and I think I know the answer to this, is just, your thoughts immediately about the transparency in communication and the optimism and finding the balance? What has your work sort of allowed you to come to and trying to strike that balance, and maybe even the methods by which people are doing that? I'd love to hear some more about that.
Yeah, I think transparency is key. And because we're concerned, like, we want to be optimistic, but we want to be realistic. I think one of the things we've heard, we've been lucky to work with students, primarily from Clemson, who said how much they appreciate that transparency. Like they'd rather someone be real with them than paint a picture that is not gonna happen because it's not fair, really. They just feel like they got duped instead of just being really honest. And I think one of the things I found, even with our younger, I just have recently done a whole bunch of meetings with our oldest girls, 15, 16 years old. And one of the things I found really interesting is that they were put at ease by just being able to ask the questions and to know we have that on record. Not that we had the answers. That didn't, because we were worried about having the answers, but just those town halls where people could ask the questions and know that they're out there, and to be really transparent and saying, I'm writing these, or we're recording this, or however it is that we're going to keep track of all these. And those will be what we're working towards. And that they wanted to just know, like, our our opinion and knew it was an opinion of what we thought the goal was. So I think having that overarching goal is our goal is that we will have camp and that we feel pretty optimistic about having camp. What we don't know is how it will look. And just saying those really frank words, it's super transparent. You could just see a collective, even in Zoom, you could see this collective like, okay, so they believe it can happen. Whereas I think last year for a lot of us, we're like, we don't even know if we can. I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know anything. So I think it's okay to say you don't know, but I think having some clarity in what you feel like confident in, and then just listening to those questions was amazing to watch.
I had the same experience, Jolly, and it struck me what was so interesting. We did a town hall on Tuesday, so I stole that name from Howie. So thank you, Howie. But the thing that struck me the most was I have this whole list of questions. I pulled it up before. There was all about wearing masks and shields and our families coming back. What, all these things, what will they look like? But the one that hit me the most was, is camp 100% happening? It was like they needed to hear from me, even though I've done a staff video and bonjuros and like, yeah, come on, it's happening. We have all these kids. It was like they needed to see me on Zoom and say, it is happening. And that, thinking back on it, like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But it kind of struck me that night of, they just need to hear that directly from me. And then that night she applied. She was like, I just need to hear from you that it was happening. It was, and I talked to my husband about it. He's like, well, you get so invested in something. And then when it gets ripped away from you, and I think a lot of people have felt things ripped away, that they need to know, okay, if I put myself into this again, I need to know that it's going to happen, or as sure as you can be that it's happening for those that don't have the go ahead yet.
And it feels like that credibility is as important when you speak to parents, customers, as you do with staff, and depending on your staff recruitment or staff hiring process, if you're an owner director who perhaps gives that responsibility off to other people in your organization, maybe this is a year where your staff need to hear it directly from you, which may be different because there may be just a little more oomph in the message, knowing that Howie or Kelly or Kim or Jolly are doing it, and not Mary, who's been the staff recruitment coordinator. So I'm thinking like that could be some of the approaches that people may want to consider, just to solidify in people's minds that this is the path forward and it's coming straight from me and my team is committed as ever. That's just a reaction I had to this part of the conversation, but I'm thinking that could be something people could consider too.
Well, and I think one of the things that Jolly and I have talked about too is really modeling for our staff. I think if they see us being that transparent, how are we dealing with things where we need to be, adaptive and flexible, we're modeling that for them, which is what we really want them to in turn model for our campers. And so it's a valuable, sort of those teachable moments where we have this opportunity to show them how it's okay not to have all the answers. And Jolly and I really, really love the word yet. We don't have to know this yet. That doesn't mean we're not going to work hard to try to figure it out between now and the summer, but right now it's still, it's still unknown, and we might need your help to figure this out. And so I'm sure we'll talk about this as we go on, but really empowering staff to join us in those efforts, because this is going to help build that buy-in and build trust. What are things that they can do to help us get ready for the summer?
Did you get that from the You Are Awesome book, the adding yet on the end of something? Have you read that book yet?
I haven't, not yet.
Okay, it's a book and it's called You Are Awesome, and there's a whole chapter on, instead of I can't do that yet. I don't know yet. So you'll have to read that, Kim.
I'm writing it down. Whenever you give me a book suggestion, Kelly, I always take it. Or podcasts. I'm now listening to Brene Brown religiously because of what I heard you say. It was one of your inspirations at one of these podcasts. So,
well, I'm happy to hear my inspirations inspiring someone else.
Yes.
So your inspiration is Kimspiration.
I guess so. Look at that.
Yeah.
So we talked about this a little bit, but that is a really good lead in to what recruitment strategies do you feel, having the pulse of the nation, are new staff responding to right now?
One
Go
of the
ahead.
things that we heard that just kind of blew our minds, I guess, in terms of and this was from our Clemson friends, was the idea of really connecting the dots. And so really looking at, I think a lot of us do this, at the end of the summer, we have that resume workshop for our staff where we help them translate those skills that they learned, and we, put it on paper, and maybe even help them maybe some interview, question practice or something like that. But what we heard from our student friends is that they really want to know that. They don't want to know it, wait till August to find that out, because that's a key thing that can help somebody make a decision if they know what their growth opportunities are or their growth zone is. And so really letting them know on the front end what kind of skills they're going to be practicing and developing, or even asking them what they would like to practice or work on this summer, and how camp can help them, sort of be the practice ground, the playground for working on those kind of skills. And so they said it, and it just really, both Jolly and I were like, holy cow, this is, this is, and they also want to know, which I found was interesting, they want to be able to see themselves not just a one and done summer. They want to know, like, what does it look like if I come back for year 2? Like, how can I grow some more? Or year 3, what does that look like? And that should be music to our ears as camp owners and directors, right? Because we know how hard it is to recruit staff. And if they're already thinking about year 2 and 3, then, that's even more amazing. So.
Jolly, anything to add to that? Because I think that we're getting almost into this really cool conversation, how, marketing to staff, this whole concept of marrying, marketing and recruitment and education and all that stuff. And you guys have, so much to draw on given, the work that you do. Can you relate it to some of that stuff? Because, we want to move into sort of how can people set themselves up really well. So as a springboard from what, Kim just talked about, where does this whole concept of marketing, why this is the best decision you could make kind of thing go?
Yes. And I think it's the time that we spend right now. So how do you set yourself up right now? It's just spending that time to figure out what is the path for my staff. Like, if I was going to talk to someone who hasn't even applied yet, what their first summer, what they're going to gain from it, all the experiences that they're going to have, and how that's going to help them in the future. And not only that, but then in the second summer, what they're going to gain, right? And what is the path this first summer to get to that point, right? So a lot of clarity, like if you want a leadership position in that second year, and here's the path to get there the first year, here are the markers you need to hit, here's what we're going to supply you with, here's the support we're going to give you. And then the third year, that's exactly why it's music to your ears. Like, your staff are saying to us, like, before I even apply, I'd like to know how I can be there and move and grow in the next 3 years. Like, okay. But that means what we have to do is set ourselves up by spending the time to know what that is. Again, it's what I said earlier, is like, we have in our head what that is, but they can't read inside there, right? They haven't had the experience to know that. So we need to set it up beforehand. And one of the ways, that Kim and I do this is by looking at places that are already doing this, whether this is camps. We look a lot of times outside of camps. So organization companies that are doing really cool things to support their staff culture and to grow their staff. And Kim found a podcast that was talking about a particular business that was voted like the best business to work, for employees, called You Need a Budget. And she sent it over to me. She was like, you're going to love this. And it was their whole onboarding, like even before they onboarding before they even hired the person. And I was like, this is amazing. And so I took that and literally wrote, like stole it basically. Thank you. You Need a Budget. Took their template and then just made it for camp. And then I needed a little, I wanted to see, what does this do? I think Kim and I like to see it in action. It's great to talk about really good ideas, but how does it really work on the ground? So I went into the system in January. So I'd been working on it for several months. And I went into our like Camp Minder system to see our applicants that had not finished. Do you have those where you could see like someone has it? Normally I don't even pay attention. I figure if they don't want to apply, I'm not bothering. Like to me, that's like the first step. You've completed. But I needed like a little group for my research. So there were about 12 of them, and they all had started and not finished back in October. So I sent this document to them and just said, hey, I noticed you started the application. I wanted to send you some more information about camp and what you might gain. Out of those 12, 10 applied and 2 were so phenomenal. I've never had anyone, they had obviously read it. And because a lot of our questions are about their leadership development, what they've done, what they want to do, their goals. And 2 were like probably the most thoughtful I've ever seen in their responses. And then 8 of those signed up for an interview. Like I've never even bothered with those people. And partly was I didn't have that information, but that time spent, and this is a small, a small like group. I mean, it just was the first initial example that I tried it on. But I think that just spending that time, because then what I started doing is then sending it out to other staff who could give it to their friends, alumni. I started using this as a tool, but it was pretty clear what they were going to gain from it. What we wanted from them, what they could expect from us. And that's all stuff I talk about all the time. But the format of it was just a little different, using this format that the You Need a Budget did, that was more magazine kind of style, more professional, I think, looking, I would say, Kim, right? I love campy, but this was like, this is real. This isn't just like, I'm going to go play and have this assumption. So that, I think, time to just get yourself set up. That's going to give you a successful recruitment for not just this year, but for years to come.
I love that that reference to, I'll use the sort of the marketing phrase of the low-hanging fruit, so to speak, right? You have people who have taken the time to start something. They've got to you by starting an application. And I think for all our listeners, like that is a really great starting point. And I think that example, and it's kind of funny, Jolly, my camp administrator just recently said, hey, I saw 15 people. And it's just sort of, I feel so validated that I gave her the thumbs up, good instinct. So thank you for that. I feel like I'm on the right path. So I really do appreciate that. To your point around, making something more professional, or maybe there's an image of what camp material always looks like and how can you sort of break the mold per se. I'd like to go on to maybe a related topic, because for some of us who hire a large number of high school students, and I think this applies to university, college age applicants as well. The role that almost convincing their parents to endorse this experience, right? And I'd love for each of you to maybe talk about where that fits in, because there's always, as I said before, like there's always fine lines between everything we do, but the fine line of the independence of this is your job. But sometimes we know staff have to almost convince their parents to give them the thumbs up, the green light to go back to camp the next year, So I'm just wondering, in the context of parents, the context of in a COVID-focused summer and safety, and are we taking care of our staff as well as we do our campers? I threw in a lot there, but I'm just wondering if you guys could sort of pick apart some of those things and give some insight.
I'd be happy to, because I think we're missing out if we don't recognize the fact that this is our staff today. This is Gen Z. This is, and I know a lot of us are familiar with the term helicopter parents. Well, I've heard a term that the parents for Gen Z, which is most of our staff age at this point, high school, college, and even a little bit beyond, is that parents are looked at as co-pilots. And so they consult or confer with their parents on a lot of things, right? It's sort of a process where they talk things out with their parents and run things by their parents. And so I think we're we're missing out if we don't take that into consideration. And so one of the things that I've noticed, there's a camp in North Carolina that's that they are doing a really phenomenal job with this, and they are reaching out to parents of staff age, even finding campers who maybe stopped going to camp at some point, but now they're camp age to work at camp, and they are now putting something out there to their parents and saying, this is what we can do. This is the growth and development that's going to happen with your, in this case, sons, and thinking about how camp, I think, it just blows my mind when we think that there's this magic line that, okay, one day somebody's a camper and then the next day they're a staff member. And so one day we care about them and their growth and development, and then the next day we don't. I don't think so. I mean, it's a process, and we have a huge hand in how we can further develop those young people if we take them across that line and show them that path, as Jolly was mentioning. If parents can see that, it's a win-win for everybody. It truly is. And so, as you can tell, I'm a little bit passionate about this. So, I mean, it's something that I think about all the time, because I really think, I do understand we want to give our young people independence, that they should be doing this on their own. It's a job, but it's our job to teach them that and to show them what that looks like. And maybe as their oldest campers, getting them ready for what that looks like to fill out that job application for the first time, or what it looks like to have an interview before you work at camp, kind of thing. So. Sorry, Jolly, I'll let you jump in.
No, I know. I was like, I think also just understanding that, because I love that you said that there's not that line. And I think sometimes we get caught up, and there's lots of talk about generational differences, and we get caught up in like, they're adults. This should not be my job. I have enough to do, right? Like, I want to take care of the campers. I didn't start a camp to have to take care of my staff, right? I want them to be adults. And I think that there's so much backstory there that understanding that can help us rather than kind of make that a barrier that we're constantly banging our head against, to accept it. And there's a couple things I think that it's a societal thing. That generation didn't say like, I'd like not to be independent and thought of as helpless, and that someone else has to. I mean, that's not like they didn't come out like thinking that, but as society as a whole, right, made some decisions that have made it harder for them to do these things or to grow in ways that would just naturally, what we think of as naturally, I'm not sure how natural it really is, but the things that maybe our generation or generations before us could do, where it's just like playing in the neighborhood, right, and making rules for the game ourselves rather than the teacher or somebody else making these. And those are critical skills that they need to be able to do that. And so I don't want us to forget that. I'm married to a historian who studies like the early modern, like 1500 to 1800 in Europe, and he studies families and children. And it's fascinating to look at his research because the courts and things like that didn't consider youth. They didn't have the word adolescence then, so youth, until about 25 to 30 years old. So if you think about that, and then you think about what we know now of the brain, the science of it, and the decision-making 25-ish then it all makes sense. Like, and I think we can then accept that as part of our mission and our, our actions in our camp development, right? Like of a whole community, that it's a whole community effort. So I think having that background kind of helps us to make sure we got off, I know a little bit, but I think that helps us instead of making that a wall that we're like, I'm just trying to break down the wall so they can become independent and I don't have to deal with this anymore with the staff. But by allowing those parents in, allowing them to help co-pilot and making them partners, then our job does become easier.
Well,
we don't have to do much.
That's exactly it. And I find myself over the last several years as part of, and in our camp, the tradition has been the camp owner has done all the hiring. So there's a relationship, and that's just a function of just our tradition here in our organization. But I find myself in the last couple years actually front loading with some coaching of what is acceptable and what I would deem as, this acceptable relationship between camp and your parent kind of thing. And there may be questions and encouraging them or in fact, giving them some advice. Hey, you may go and relay this conversation to your parents. If they have questions, I would encourage you to follow up with me in these ways. They've got great questions. Hey, they should be heard. Can I suggest that, since we're developing this working relationship, maybe it go through you? Those kinds of things I feel have worked for me the last couple of years, and I find myself less stressed or frustrated because I've intentionally tried to incorporate. And I think that's exactly right, Jolly and Kim. It's a function of the audience we now have and the young adults we're working with, who we vitally need. So I feel you sort of have to embrace this and make it work for yourself.
Yeah. And it's that coaching, right? You're helping set that expectation up. Again, that goes back to, how can we, what things can we do to set ourselves up for success? And that's having those conversations ready for the interview, not reacting when the parent calls you and says, hey, my son or daughter just interviewed, and you're like, what? It's like setting that up ahead of time that says, you're going to have questions, and parents always come up with better questions sometimes that you didn't even think of, so give me a call once you have those, or, here's how. I love that, because it's that coaching. And then this goes back to what Kim was saying about modeling. So what we're doing, we're having the opportunity then to coach and mentor our staff in the way that we would like them to then coach and mentor our campers. So rather than thinking of them as these like independent consultants that should know what they're doing, apparently, when they come in at, 15, 16, 18, 20, whatever, that we're saying, here, I'm going to model for you, with you, how I want you to help our kids grow, our campers grow. And it just, to me, that it's a way better system, actually, than what we maybe used to do, when we just let everybody like, here, we need you to, teach swim, or we need you to do this. Here's the time frame. I just think about how orientation was for me. It was amazing that we did it. I'm not sure how intentional we were. But again, it worked at the time. But I actually think this kind of new system is a great way to really get the best out of what camp is about in the most intentional and thoughtful way. So it excites me. I know it excites Kim to say that too, but I love what you're doing, Howie. I think that's really a great tool.
Mm-hmm. Well, what Kim said about embracing it. So instead of saying, nope, that's not how we do it, or getting frustrated by those generational things, it's embracing it. It's like the Michael Brandwein. You can't just stop a freight train that's going, like, to get people's attention. You got to hop on that freight train and then slow it down. So I really like that. And especially this summer, that parents are going to be concerned about their child and the risk in a job that they're going to be taking. So I really like the idea of embracing what this generation looks like with that relationship. And we actually did a parent night in 2019 where we invited the staff parents back, not the kids' parents. We invited the staff parents back, and we had activities, and we did flag, and we had a potluck, not probably COVID friendly, but we did it. And the intention was to one, have them see their kids in action. Like, look at your kids shine at this place, because they talk about it, talk. And again, we're at day camp, so residential camp, that would be harder, but the parents could come and see. And then when their kid wanted to come back, I'd hope then we'd have that buy-in. Like, yes, I saw the way you were just shining at that job, and it got me excited. It was so fun. So yes, I think that's a good choice. But I think anything that we can do, a podcast where we interview a parent of a staff member, and why do you think it's great for your kid to work here? Or maybe they were a camper, then counselor. But I think anything we can do to embrace that and hop on that train, and like how we said with coaching and Jolly, is a really positive thing for camp owners right now.
I was thinking as well, we're a day camp. I have the good fortune to be involved both overnight and day in my life here. So, at the day camp, similar to Kelly, like, my friend works at another camp, and they don't allow the parents of staff to come to family night and things like that. But, if you're really true to what you say about values, about family and community, then I think you also have to be prepared to embrace the extension of your staff's families as part of yours as well, because boy, that front row seat, as Kelly described, for having that staff parent evening just could fuel so much for years to come, and allow staff to feel comfortable returning. And I think that for a parent to sit in I have this vision of the parent of a staff member on my family nights, 50 feet away, seeing their 19-year-old getting down to the level of a camper and seeing, like, these aren't things they see their kids, their own kids do on a regular basis. Like, if you can see them be successful on that job, that's super powerful. And I just love all this talk as well. Kelly, any thoughts on how we can tap into this amazing knowledge we're getting already?
I know. I was just thinking, was there anything, Kim and Jolly, before we move on to our next question that we had queued up for you, is there anything else? I heard time. So time, lots of time this year. Connection, embracing that relationship with parents, onboarding before you onboard, growth opportunities. Those are some of the notes that I had made. Is there anything else you think that camp should be doing right now before we move on to set themselves up for successful recruitment? Anything else we didn't touch on that you wanted to share?
The only thing else I was thinking of, Kelly, was just the whole idea of really empathizing with where your staff are right now and understanding what's going on for them in their world. What is their world has been like for the last, whenever the last time that you saw them or had some sort of contact with them, and just understanding, their challenges and what they're going through and what needs and wants they have. And then how can we, as we're thinking about bringing them to camp this summer, how do we support them? How do we help them get with those needs, and how do we, give them things that are going to help them make that transition from this whatever world they're in right now, because it's different for everyone, and into what's coming up at camp. And so I think we really have to take a look at that. And we think we know, because we know what's going on in our own household, but do we really know what's going on for each of our individual staff? So, and really paying attention to the differences, whether, they're in school or they're virtual or they're hybrid or they're working from home or they're, there's so many different scenarios that we need to kind of pay attention to. So I think just really empathizing with them and where they're coming from and what they're going to how that's going to impact when they arrive at camp.
And I think, Kelly, you talked about what you did, which is that town hall meeting. I mean, that's if you want to what do I do how do I empathize? How do I actually do something about that right now? And I think that's a great way of a town hall, meeting, a camp hall meeting, and just really being able to answer questions, even with we don't know yet. It's just hearing those questions. So I would say you have that tool right there.
In talking to a lot of camp directors, I know that a lot of camp directors are giving thoughts to even implementing more supports within their management team, and supports specifically geared to staff as they make the move from the worlds that they've lived into, communal living that looks very different than the last time they were there, and what kind of supports we can put in place for that. But also in an overnight camp setting, how can we deliver sort of the mental health breaks, the days, the substitute for days off if they're not allowed to have days off. So I think all of this that Kim has highlighted in this part of our discussion is so important, because even being upfront with your staff early in the process to say that you're thinking of those things, and using our word of the day, yet. We don't know exactly what it'll look like yet, but when you come back to camp, these are the things we know we want to have for you, so you can feel really good about this. So I know that it's been on the minds of a lot of camp directors, colleagues that I've been speaking to, about that support for staff. And and I guess the message is, like everything else, don't be shy to give your staff a preview to what you're thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I think also to have them involved in that, right? Like, let them be involved in that process of, what do you think? What does it look like to you if we're not going to have that? And, Kim and I just did a session at Nationals about that, like creating committees. Again, there's this idea that they haven't had an experience, like leadership experience for a year. There's this gap in that learning and experience from camp. These are great ways that you can create opportunities for them. Hey, look, we're looking for volunteers to be on 3 different committees. We have one that's staff morale, one that's whatever it is, mask education for kids. and let them do that and be part of that process and to ask those questions. It's another really good thing that you can be doing right now to set yourself up with your staff. That might be less with recruiting and more with your returning, getting staff to return, because now they have something they can be involved with.
Yeah, I think what Howie and Kim said too is a great segue into talking about how will staff training change this summer. And you even mentioned some things in there, mask education, Jolly. So what are the two of yours thoughts on how staff training will change this summer and what we need to be thinking about now to prepare ourselves?
I can start us off. This is something that I've been thinking about even before COVID, but just really thinking about those nuggets, that what I call, or what's the term is, micro learning, and really thinking about how we can break down those things for our staff into really manageable bite-sized chunks, so we're not, giving them the staff training from a fire hose. And so just really, what is the most important thing that they need to know about this? And so really those takeaway things that they can really wrap their minds around and have, so it's not how much more can we add to this topic, but how can we sort of almost take away from the topic till we can't take away anymore. Like this is what is absolutely necessary for our staff to know, but not adding all this extra fluff stuff that just kind of gets in the way. It's noise in terms of what's going to really help them be successful at their jobs, at their work.
I think another thing that may change depending upon, and this is regional too, how camps have to either pod, right? So day camp, they say, look, we don't want more than, 50 people, or, depending upon your staff size in certain areas. So I think where people are doing their training is going to matter, but also this may be the push that we need as those people who like to kind of control all the different pieces, that if we have to have these smaller groups where you can only have 5 to 10 in a group, or 20, that you may be able to let go of some of the training. So looking at what parts of training someone else can be doing so that we can have the sizes that we need. But I also think that's probably a good thing, even if we didn't need to, but this could be the push we need to have those smaller groups. I mean, think about it even at university, right? You have a huge lecture hall versus your smaller, upper level class. You can get so much more done actually in the same amount of time or shorter, which goes then to Kim's point, right? Can you do micro learning in smaller pods where people are really engaged and not at the back of the class, sleeping or doodling or, what have you? And so even though maybe these things should have been happening before COVID, just like the micro learning and some of the change may be that we're forced to do it. And it's for our own good, maybe, and hopefully we'll have that part of it will have a lasting impact on our staff training.
I actually have some testimony from a camp that I worked with this past summer who had to do part of their training in virtually, and then they had to part of their training in person, just because of the phases that they were in when, it was orientation time and when camp was starting. And so they had to really be creative on how they were going to make this all go down. And the things that they said afterwards when I talked to them, this fall, was they realized how valuable it was to let go of some of that training and let other people do it. It was really empowering. And so I like to think of, I like to use the word, crowdsourcing, because I think we have this opportunity to, if we do have, using different platforms, if some of it's virtual, some of it's in person, we have opportunities to bring in those alumni who can give those little, great little micro learning nugget pieces, or, former staff, or, current staff, bringing on new staff. I mean, there's so many people we can empower to do that particular training. And then the other thing was this is a camp it's a large day camp, and they have over 300 staff. And so they really stopped and thought about what that must feel like because there's a lot of rah rah on the opening day of staff orientation. And they really stopped and thought about what that might feel like for a new person who's never been there before. And they were like, oh my gosh, I bet this is really overwhelming. And so by doing these small pods that they did online, they had a leader with so many people and they were doing these small group discussions. They could see how the new people really, it was a very much just easier transition, and just they felt more part of the community probably more quickly than they would have had they been in person. So
Yeah, I was thinking that as we spoke about earlier about even mapping out the journey of your staff experience, this almost, I'll call it a decentralized method of delivering training. You know, part of the journey for leadership at camp is delivering training. It could be something, if you were intentional about a stepping stone in your camp experience, hearing both you and Kim, both you and Jolly talking about this, that it could be a nice feature where at a certain point in your camp staff experience, you may be called upon and given training on how to train. So now a component of your camp is train the trainer kind of stuff. And what a cool thing that is. And it's something that I know we've tried to do over many years. And to Kim, your point, if I could offer the audience a tip, bouncing off Kim's great idea of the camp she worked with, I operate a large day camp with almost 300 staff as well. And several years ago, I can honestly say one of my favorite components of staff training / orientation is we have a separate evening just for new staff, where we can onboard them without the sense of everyone's hugging each other because they haven't seen each other, and now we can do it sort of. And then on the first day of full staff, we bring in the new staff, and the returning staff are already in our big sort of auditorium, and we give them a standing ovation for joining us. So it's been, I can reinforce Kim's, experience with the camp she worked with, that I feel it does have, if you can really think through those processes, I believe the new staff, it makes me really happy when a new staff can say to me after the end of the summer, I felt comfortable right from the get-go. And I think we can start really thinking about micro-learning and all these things. So I'm so glad we've explored this topic. I know I tell the audience that I've tried my best with my team to do that, and I'm seeing the benefits of that. So try to do it if you can.
So Jolly, I think you should mention your, because this is one thing that she's been doing for a long time about having staff. She even has a little application that they fill out if they'd like to present something at staff training. So tell this is really good.
Well, I was just going to say, I think this is a way to help guide. We were talking earlier about coaching, right? Training the trainer. And it's also just one of those ways to connect the dots to say at some point, a way you can present at a conference, whether it's a camp conference or in engineering or wherever it is, this is how you can get a paper or a presentation presented. And so I literally just used, the template that conferences have of what's the topic, what are the objectives, what are you doing, what equipment, what's the style? Is it, a classroom lecture style? So they could think about all those components, and then they can submit that. And then we could decide how that would work. And we also like, how much time do you need? And we offer the slots. Do you need a 20-minute slot, a 60-minute slot, an hour and a half? And then that just allows them to have the opportunity to do it. But I think that the key is connecting that to that. This isn't just about camp. This is how you will be able to use this in the future. And we can also use that to our benefit if we have the opportunity to let them go to a camp conference, which is always a great thing. If you can get your frontline staff to a conference, the expectation then is that they will present. So that's kind of the payment back or forward, however you want to say. We'll send you here, but our expectation is you'll present something. So they have that application looking like, well, what is it that I'm really excited about at camp, at the conference that I want to share? So I agree, Howie, that you do see the benefits of it, and how that develops the leaders that you want. And then you can breathe a little in orientation. You don't have to present everything. And it's just nice to hear someone else's voice. They don't necessarily want to hear your voice the whole time.
Yes, I do. Yes, for sure. And and it just is sort of this just enhancing camp culture and what you're all about. And I think that this attention to the staff experience that we've been discussing through recruitment and considerations for the marketing of the staff experience. I think all of this in this sort of last part of our discussion of staff training, because I know we're all starting to think about, I would imagine if camp directors out there like Kelly and I, like, it's trying to limit what you think about in any given day, like trying to just say, like, I talk about recruitment training, and that's what I'm thinking about today. But it's happening fast, and we can definitely give the necessary time with our teams to plan this out and really do it effectively. So I want to thank you guys. This has been just a wonderful discussion and really helpful. I know our audience will really enjoy all the good advice and tips and experience you've provided. We are moving on to the next phase of our discussion and our show, which is inspiration. And at the end of every show, as our listeners will know, we try to get our guests, and I know Kelly and I share an inspiration. And it can be anything. It could be a book, an article, a podcast, a leadership quote, your own life experience, whatever you think may help our listeners become better camp professionals. We encourage you to share. So, Kelly, do you think maybe we ask our guests and we'll close it out, kind of thing? Or are you good with that? Let's do that. Let's go for it. Jolly, why don't we get you to share your inspiration? Because we have to go to Kimspiration just afterwards.
I love it. I love that. Well, mine is a person, actually. And since this is about staffing, and for me, I'm just so passionate about these emerging leaders, these young adults that are coming into their own and being able to help them with that. My inspiration is actually Amanda Gorman, if anybody remembers who she is. She's on the lips of a lot of people right now. And she was the young poet who recited a beautiful poem that she had written at the inauguration. And it's not just that poem that I loved learning more about her journey. And she really acknowledges the mentorship. I think she is quintessential of this generation who likes mentorship, who likes to have coaching, who acknowledge that they have room for growth. The fact that those Clemson students said, I want to know my growth zone. I never said that. I just was like, yeah, I guess I'll grow. I'll learn it. I don't know. I wasn't thinking so intentionally. And to me, she epitomizes that generation's ideas of what's possible, their own growth, and the fact that they know they have room for it, and that as a society, we can be better. And I think that's what camp is. And she just, I've just loved learning more about her journey and who she is and the people that she acknowledges have supported her. So that's who's inspired me at the moment.
Well, that's a great one. Definitely a lot of talk, even in Canada, about the impression she's left. I know it's been part of a lot of conversations. She's incredibly impressive, and some of the interviews she had post her inauguration presentation have been just really inspiring. So thanks for sharing that. I agree. Yeah. Kim, your thoughts?
Well, since you sort of set me up for Kimspiration, I'm actually changing what I was going to say earlier, and so a lot of times, because on my Instagram, I have, thanks to actually Jolly's son, who came up with Kimspiration, because he helps me post all of my things on Instagram, is I walk my dogs a lot. I'm always out walking dogs, and I'm always out running. And so I like to see like what is going to come across my path in any given moment that has that teachable lesson for me. And so just a couple that have happened in the last week or so. Twice I've been walking downtown, and I've seen, like, on one business, there was a sign that said, no strollers allowed. And if you saw that sign and that's all the sign said, you would be like, gosh, that's really not a very friendly place. I wouldn't want to go into that store. But the store owner had put a clarifying statement underneath why, and it was the why strollers are not allowed in this store. And it was because there's no space for them to turn around or maneuver. It's too small of a space. Right across the street, they're doing a huge renovation. There's tractors and they're breaking up the concrete and all this stuff. And just the other day, a giant sign pops up and it says, pardon our mess. We are, our plumbing or our sewer system is circa 1913. And so, so you get the idea, like, this is why we have this mess and all this noise, is because we need to update our infrastructure. And so it's that whole idea of why. And my third one is just walking the other day, and I was walking through, and I live on a town that's a coastal North Carolina town. And I heard this sound, and I was trying to figure out where the sound was coming from. And I looked over into the water, and a sailboat was in the yacht basin. And what I figured out, because they weren't moving at this point, is they had dropped their anchor. And the anchor was making the noise because it was trying to, sort of grab hold of the whatever's on the bottom of the yacht basin so that it could hold the sailboat in place. So actually, Jolly, it made me think of you because of your true north and that whole idea of we have to have an anchor. We have to drop an anchor so that we have some sort of vision of where we're headed. And so we're dropping that down to grab onto. And so those are my things. I just am always looking or seeing what comes across my path that has a really great lesson that I can learn from and hopefully pass on to others.
Well, first of all, your observational skills and your ability to take those observations and translate them into some really great lessons and things to think about is incredibly impressive. So congrats on that, for sure. Because I think a lot of those examples you gave us are very inspirational, but also we can see ourselves the relationship to daily life, maybe training, those types of things. So thank you for sharing. I'd like to share mine, if I might, Kelly, and I'll turn things over to you afterwards. Mine is an article that I came across. I can't remember exactly how I got it, but the title of the article was written in The Guardian, called "Why Your Most Important Relationship is with Your Inner Voice." And I think, for me, given the times that we're all working through and a lot of what is going through our heads as camp professionals, owners, directors every day, this article speaks to the power of your inner voice and how it can help you get through some really, really challenging times. And there's a part of this article that I particularly liked about a technique called, a technique that the pandemic, that we can employ to help us through pandemic anxiousness, and that is temporal distancing. This requires a person to look ahead, to see themselves determinedly in the future. Studies show that if you ask those getting through a difficult experience how they will feel about 10 years in time rather than tomorrow, their troubles immediately seem more temporary. So does this really help people? And so the question becomes, like, how do we, have a vision to what lies ahead? And if we look with optimism and hopefulness, it can somehow dissipate what we're dealing with in the moment. So I would encourage people to check out the article. It's really well written and may serve helpful as we're working through all the stuff that we're working through. Kelly?
All right, Howie. I meant to look that up. I like it. My inspiration happened for me this week with the national conference being online. One of the benefits, and I saw Kim there too, was the Acorn Society. I've always been curious about it. I didn't really know what it was about. And this year they invited anyone to join their virtual reception. And so I logged on last night, and my first reaction, honestly, was I felt like I was at the Grammys of camping. Like, I was just scrolling through, and I am relatively new to the ACA world. So my camping experience prior wasn't involved with ACA, but just in the past 6 years, I was scrolling through the gallery, and it just was like these monumental people in camping. I just was struck by their camaraderie, by their commitment to camping, to each other. And it was just a really neat event to be a part of. But something that really struck me near the end, they had talked about their founding, and they showed the charter from 1984 and all of the signatures that said we are committed to this. And the idea of giving financially also these people all give so much of themselves and their time, but giving financially to a future that you have no idea what that looks like, but entrusting those future leaders of camping to handle it and to take it and to support them when you have no idea what that will look like and what that means. And one of the quotes that they said was, so often we are warmed by fires we don't start, and we drink from wells that we did not dig. And I felt that last night, and I thought all these people and paving the way, and it was amazing. It was really something special. And I felt really inspired just to be surrounded via Zoom with those individuals. So that was really inspiring to me and really imprinted on me last night. So I really appreciated that opportunity and look up to those people. So that was great. So I recommend, if you have an opportunity to do that, to check that out. So great show. Thank you for those inspirations, everyone. Jolly and Kim, we could talk for hours, so this was hard to cut short, but we appreciate your time and your obvious dedication to camping and making sure that we all have a really phenomenal staff and camp this summer. So thank you so much. Howie, always a joy. If anyone wants to get a hold of us, we always end with that as well. So Jolly, if you want to share how people can get a hold of you, that would be great.
Absolutely. You can email me, jollycorley@gmail.com, and it's JOLLYCORLEY. You can hop on my website, which is the same thing, just jollycorley.com. Love to hear from you. Social media outreach, you can it's Jolly Corley. Just put Jolly Corley into anything and you'll be able to. That's social media. I'm on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. So not as active on Twitter, but if there's something exciting going on, I'll join in. I like socializing.
Great.
How's your TikTok game?
Oh, I just opened a TikTok, but actually not for me, for camp, but I do need to open my own. Kim has one. There you go. That's your intro, Kim.
Thanks, Jolly. So you can find me at my email is Kim D. Aycock. I was just telling Jolly the other day, I wish I had forethought years ago when I made my Gmail account, maybe to do it a little bit differently, but it has my middle initial. So Kim D. Aycock at Gmail. And then my website is kimaycock.com. And you can get Twitter. No, I don't do Twitter. Actually, Instagram, Facebook, all of those things, Pinterest. But I did open a TikTok account. And the reason why I opened a TikTok account, did you know?
Because of her dance moves. Don't let her, she's going to tell you some story, but her TikTok is from her dance moves. Sorry, go ahead.
You know me so well. Tom Rosenberg has a TikTok account. The reason why I opened up a TikTok account is because Project Real Job, as many of you know, that I'm very passionate about, is helping, it's ACA's resources to help camps recruit, hire, and retain staff. But we started a TikTok account called Work at Camp. And so we are encouraging as many, so this is for you camp owners and directors out there, to share this with your staff. It's at Work at Camp on TikTok, because the more followers that we get, the more we can share that message universally, that working at camp is a valuable experience for all the reasons that we've been talking about in this podcast. So
great. What about you, Howie? How can they get a hold of you?
Well, I think Work at Camp on TikTok with a couple of Kim's dance moves, Jolly, is something I'm ready to tune into. So I'm joining that today. Folks, you can reach me at Howie, HOWIE, at camprobinhood.ca, and Howie Grossinger on social media. And look forward to connecting. If you have any questions, comments, reaching out, love to speak to all the camp pros out there.
All right. And I can be reached at Kelly with a Y at hiddenpinesranch.com. I am currently only filming TikToks for my staff when they turn in applications. So we'll see if those become viral. Not at this moment. But I need to get on that train because that's where it's headed. Please do not forget that you can find all of our show notes at gocamp.pro/COP. You can find the resources that we mentioned in this episode and lots of good stuff there from our show and other Go Camp Pro podcasts out there. We hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for listening, everyone.